Do you usually keep up with current events?
So, how do you keep up with the news, Dr. Raymond?
Online and through the newspaper and to some extent on television.
When you watch television, what station do you follow? What channel do you usually tend to go to?
CNN.
Okay.
Do you usually keep up with current events?
Yeah, absolutely. Follow stuff on Twitter, mainly Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, stuff like that. Make sure I'm up to date on what's going on.
Good, I'm glad to hear that. So what is your traditional station that you always go to and rely on?
Probably for Twitter, I would say I usually do either Fox Business or CNN Money. You get a lot of mix between financial markets and current events. And then on television, probably just a local news, whatever, 2, 4, or 11.
So, do you keep up with current events?
Yeah, pretty well, I think, for the most part.
And where do you get your news from?
Normally I just go to the Plain Dealer a couple times a week, and that's about it.
Do you usually keep up with current events?
I do.
Good, I'm glad to hear that. Where do you usually get your news from?
BuzzFeed.
Nice, thank you. How would you say that you get your news?
TV news and paper.
So would you say it's very important to keep up to date with everything?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for being here.
So, how do you get your news, Andrew?
Through the TV.
And when you watch TV, what station do you tend to use?
PBS.
PBS? It's very interesting. Thank you very much.
Miss Diane, can you please tell us what is your main news source?
I like to listen to the news on the TV.
Ross, where do you get your news from?
Usually I get my news from like a news app on my iPhone or NPR I listen to on the radio.
Okay, and what do you feel is the most important piece of news today at the moment?
I think it's probably going to be the talks between the U.S. and Putin and different countries and figuring out stuff with that.
So, Joe, are there any current events that you're interested in right now?
Yes, I follow current events pretty closely, and the one that's caught my eye lately is John Boehner resigning from Congress as Speaker of the House. It's very implicative for the political arena right now, and I'm interested to see what Republicans will nominate as a new leader of the House, and we'll see how that goes forward with the budget discussions. So that's what I've been following very closely right now.
Now, where do you usually get your news?
Really, I usually read the Plain Dealer a lot over the summer, which is the newspaper for the Cleveland area. But since I've been at John Carroll, I like the New York Times, so I read the New York Times a lot.
Thank you very much.
Max, where do you get your news?
CNN.
And what do you feel is the most important piece of news today?
War and conflict.
Okay, do you think it's important for students to keep up with current events?
Definitely.
Awesome.
What is your most used news source?
It might sound kind of crazy, but I use Twitter a lot, so I follow the Times, a lot of other different sources like newspapers. So it's weird as it might sound, I do use Twitter.
Right. Thank you. Nick, are you interested in current news and events?
Yeah, I think it's definitely important for especially students to stay updated with news, especially when it comes to your disciplinary, whatever you're studying. I think it's important to be able to have a conversation about what's actually going on in the news today, whether it's economics or politics, whatever like your major is or whatever your disciplinary is. So yeah, I think it's really important.
And what are your main news sources?
For me, I'm a finance major, so it would be the Wall Street Journal and USA Today. But I also do a lot of online reading, anything that I might see as interesting or pertains to me, I'll definitely look into, so.
Do you prefer watching news with a screen, such as on television or little clips on the internet, or do you prefer just reading the information?
Most of the time I prefer reading the information, but if it's an ongoing story, I definitely like to, look into the news, go watch TV, and actually get my news that way. So, yeah, I'd say both. I like getting news from, so.
So where do you usually get your news from?
Well, most times I get my news from Instagram, Facebook. I do occasionally go online, read newspapers.
And do you think it's important for students to keep up with the news?
Oh, it's definitely important to keep up with the news. I know I'm a poli-sci major, got to know what's going on in the world, and also kind of how it applies to us. So it's really important for sure.
Thank you so much.
Matt, do you feel that as a student it's important to keep up with the news?
Yeah, I do. I feel like news is really it's a current topic and we have to keep up with it.
What is your main news source that you use to keep up with it?
I think my main news source is definitely the internet. Sometimes I read the Carroll news, but not often enough to really get a lot from it, but definitely.
Where do you usually get your news?
Honestly, BuzzFeed.
BuzzFeed.
Yeah, I'm on BuzzFeed a lot, so that's probably my main source of news.
Do you feel that it's important for students to keep up with the news?
I do. I mean, I think that a lot of the times, I mean, like even in any, like your core classes, like we talk about what's going on, like especially religions and theologies and stuff like that. So I think it is important to kind of know, like have like a general idea of what's going on for sure.
Is there a current event right now that is of interest to you?
I mean, I've been really into the refugee crisis right now, so I've been looking a lot into that. But also the Pope, like since he was just in the United States, that was a big one too. But yeah, that's about it.